What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Spark to Fire. Today, I have one of my first friends in entrepreneurship ever, my good buddy, Eric Sullivan, in the studio.
What's up, bro?
Thanks for coming in, man.
Thanks for having me.
You do a lot of different things, so I want to get right into all of the different things you do. But first, before that, you have what I would call like a really interesting hero's journey. And we talked a little bit about before we turned the mics on and everything, but you've been through a lot and you have a very unique life story that I think a lot of people need to hear. So before we kind of get into the businessy type stuff, let's start off right there.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I think, first of all, I think that like my life's journey isn't all that unique. I've told you this before, but I believe that a lot of people that go through a journey similar to mine aren't as fortunate as I am. I believe that at the end of the day, there are a lot of people that are could be entrepreneurs that are actually in the prison system, dead or in jail, right? And so, at the end of the day, there's a lot of people in this world that are built to be entrepreneurs. The biggest issue is that the systems, the school systems, the way that we've built our society is made for the other 80% of people, right? So I don't think it's a unique journey, but I grew up in Lincoln, Nebraska. I was a pretty fortunate kid, went to East High, had 2 loving parents, even though they divorced, ended up with 4 loving parents and 8 grandparents. I had a lot of really significant problems, but most of them were in my head. And most of my struggles came from internally. When I was in the 2nd grade, we figured out that I was dyslexic, which made sure that I really struggled in school. But I remember the day when I was sitting in class and I realized that that everyone else was understanding how to process written form, and that I was having significant trouble, and they pulled me out of that classroom, and that was the first time that I realized that I was different.
Wow. What was so when you're reading that and when you're trying to process words on a page, do your eyes bounce from the left side of the page all the way to the right side of the page, or how did it actually affect you directly?
Well, this is a really interesting thing because brains are extremely confusing, right? And so because of that, I've been obsessed all my life with how to create a better brain and how to hack things. And so at the end of the day, like my biggest problem was the only way that I can explain it is that letters jumble on a page when I'm not focused. Now, like there's something really interesting in the way that we process our vision, messages come in through our eyes, and then basically through symbols are communicated through our brains and then up to the neocortex, and that vision is processed by the brain. We're not actually seeing the things that we're seeing, and we actually don't understand the way that our brains work. And so like at the end of the day, like I've really thought about this, like what is dyslexia? And I think a lot of doctors have too. And I think that it's one of those things that it's different for many different people that have it.
Yeah. That learning disability, when you discovered that you had that, what was your kind of next step? Like what happened after you got pulled out of that class?
Well, I knew the first thing that went through my head was like, I'm very different. The second thing was, what's wrong with me? The third thing was, okay, I'm going to be the troublemaker, because if you can't be the smart kid, you might as well be the kid on the bleachers smoking pot. And be someone that you can be, right?
Be someone.
And then, like in 4th grade, they go over, you take like that test and they tell you like, what maybe you'll be when you grow up.
As an aptitude test?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't an aptitude test. It was more like, what type of job could you get when you grow up? And I got firefighter, I think. And it was at that point, though, that I really realized, I thought to myself and I thought, I can't be like an executive assistant I can't file someone else's paperwork. I'm not capable of doing what other people are capable of doing. And so at that point, I really checked out of school. I was in trouble really early, in substance abuse really early. So like in the 5th grade, I got kicked out of DARE and then had to do, if you don't know what DARE is, DARE is a program that they put you through in the 5th grade in order to keep you from doing drugs. They couldn't keep me from doing drugs in the 5th grade.
You were already getting after it in 5th grade.
Yeah. And so I got kicked out of DARE. I had to do community service in order to pass DARE. And it was a constant struggle, like from then until when I was 18. It's like not the typical like entrepreneurial story where it's like I've always been like this high achiever or like whatever. To be honest, my parents, psychologists told my parents like just keep him off of drugs and keep him out of jail until he's 25. Like that was the advice that my parents had, right? And so
what led what led to that sort of advice? I mean, like what? So you're clearly trying to find yourself, right? You're trying to find who is Eric Sullivan, what is this identity? And you basically decide, okay, well, I'm not going to be the smart kid.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be like the cool kid or the rebel, if you will. And so
not the cool kid, just a rebel.
Just a rebel. It's just a rebel. Yeah, definitely. And so you make this decision or a bunch of decisions that basically lead to substance abuse. But what caused you to like stay down that path? I mean, obviously like there's addiction that gets involved, but why directly into substance abuse? Or was it like alcohol first or is it pot first? Like how did it happen?
Yeah, well, I think that addiction of all kinds is actually a lack of human connection. And so that is like overall, like if you say like, hey, Eric, like what is your purpose? What's your dharma? I believe that bringing human connection to people is my dharma. And I do that in some different ways than one would expect. But I think that it was lack of human connection. I always had trouble fitting in like really well somewhere. So I was kind of scattered everywhere. I was friends with many different types of people, going to the opening of Lord of the Rings with the nerds and also playing 3 sports because my dad was a jock, right? And so not well, I wasn't playing sports well, but I was trying to keep my dad happy. And so I think that the reason for anyone being addicted, whether it's work, whether it's drugs, like those are all symptoms of something. And for me, it was just, I was looking for some sort of human connection that I wasn't getting. And still to this day, like I still have that part of me that has trouble finding human connection, which is why I'm always searching for it and searching to give other people that.
Yeah. Yeah. So what have you done? So since that point, right, you had DARE and then all the way up until you're 18, your parents got this very interesting, prescription effectively from a psychiatrist that said, just keep him out of jail until he's 26 or 25. Why? Is that when your brain is fully developed growing, then you'll have a better chance of...
It was actually till 25, and it's because like the male brain doesn't fully develop. The prefrontal cortex doesn't fully develop until you're 25 years old. And so, us men are at a disadvantage actually in that way is we enter adulthood and then we have like these like 7 years of our lives where we're not adults yet, but like we have all of the responsibility of an adult and like none of the maturity. Right. Wow. And so, I was 19 by the time I was, and I had been, flirting with treatment for some time. And, I had been tested and so on for some time. And when I was 19 years old on April 16th, I met with my dad's neighbor. He asked me what I wanted to do with my life. I said, I'll probably work at Novartis, and because my friend was making $30,000 a year, which was a lot of money.
Right.
And he was making $30,000 a year, and he was working on kind of like an assembly line in Novartis. He had, a sweet car. And I thought, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go do that. I'm going to get a sweet car, and
I'm done.
That's it. That's my whole life. And he was like, that not great,
Yeah.
you know? And he ended up talking me into going to rehab. And so about 15 days into rehab, it took 15 days for me to be like clear of mind, clear of head. You know, I went through the detoxing, hospital detoxing, all that stuff, to really just have like this moment. And I think that was the first spark in my entire life. Like I never had a spark before in my entire life. And it was like that moment where, I realized like I could go one of two directions. And there was this one direction where I knew, every single man in my family, seemingly almost every man in my family is either like dead, in jail, or pretty successful. And so those were kind of like my choices were either get sober and find a way to be successful and be someone, or continue down the road that I was going. And so at 19 years old, I decided that I was going to get sober. It's really by the grace of God that I'm sober. I'll tell you that, because I did all of the wrong things in sobriety. And when I say that, I mean like I did not follow the rules, because I can't follow rules. I don't know how to follow rules still to this day. And here we are 14 years later. I've been sober the entire time and just having sparks ever since.
What do you mean you didn't follow the rules?
Yeah. That's been a lifelong trait for me. So,
well, like specifically when it comes to like addiction.
Yeah. So, well, there's a 12-step program. You attend AA, do all of, I mean, like there's a regimented thing that you do in order to be successful in sobriety.
And you did none of those.
Did
you just get sober out of spite of those things?
I was lucky. I was really, really lucky that I had such a supportive support system. So like my friends that I was like going out with and doing drugs with and spending times with, those people were one of the best support systems that I ever had. So a lot of people, they can't get sucked back into their friend group. And my friend group was super protective of me. And so like when I came back from rehab, they all protected me from the bad things, right? And like they would get mad at people if they put those things in front of me. My parents, my siblings, like I had all of the support in the world. I attended AA, but I didn't get a sponsor. Attending AA, faded for me. I didn't go all the way through the 12-step process. And because I didn't do all of those things, I mean, I will say that like my recovery was a longer journey and getting to a place where, because it is a disease of disconnection, right? And so you can either like follow this plan, and work through those things, or figure it out on your own the hard way. And like my way is always figuring it out the hard way. Like that's what I do. That's what I do for a living.
Yeah, I know. Not really, but we're going to talk a lot about that. So you said the first spark you said was when you were about like 19. Yeah. And so you got this new taste of sobriety and this newfound understanding of what your potential was. Was that fair to say? Yeah.
I don't know if it was necessarily my potential. I still didn't have a lot of self-worth at that time, but it was an understanding that like there was something that was possible for me, and that all I had to do was grab it. That I was 19, I had my entire life ahead of me. In rehab, they do this thing called a hot seat. And it's basically just people calling you out on all of your bullshit. So you've been there for 15 days lying, right? Like you're a shithead. You've been there for 15 days lying and bullshitting everyone and telling everyone that you're fine. And like, no, I can go back to like the life that I was living. I'll be absolutely fine. And all of these things. And I'm sitting in this hot seat and it's this circle of people. Everyone calls me out on my shit. And I'm like, oh shit,
You guys got me.
You see me, right? But then there was like this old dude, like he was like 90, 94. He's in rehab. I don't know why he was in rehab, because if I was 94 years old, I'd just be like, I'm just going to keep drinking, you know?
I mean,
yeah,
man.
But he looked at me and he said, you know, you're my mom. And frankly, I don't remember if my dad was in the circle, but my mom was in the circle and she was crying. And I mean, really, really crying. And this guy took a look at me and he just said, like, you know, you have an opportunity here. Look at your mom right now. Look at your mom. Look what you've done to her. Don't do that ever again. Right. And it was like that moment that like I had like the clarity to see like what I was doing to other people. Mm-hmm. And before that moment, I couldn't see that. Like it was all about my survival and addiction, not about the things that I was doing to other people around me. Like I felt like I was the victim up until that moment. And then I saw it and I saw like, how could you hurt someone like that has done so much for you?
Wow.
And so that was really that moment where flipped the switch for me. I
would say that guy was supposed to be in that meeting for this very reason. Like he wasn't 94, you know, just trying to stay inside of that program because he needed it. He was doing it for everybody else that he think he could save. I firmly believe that God puts, you know, people in the right place at the right time for you to just like guide you around barricades or, you know, to help you just frankly get saved from things. And I mean, I've witnessed that before as well. And yeah, there's a guardian angel sitting there in the meeting with you. And he's like, dude, look at this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it just spoke volumes to me. And that was that moment. I remember later that day calling my best friend in the world at the time, Chase Einspar. And I just said, like, I'm going to be someone, right? Like, that was it. Like, I'm going to be someone.
And then what did you do next?
Well, I went home and I was someone. I was a security guard, overnight security guard at the Windstream buildings, and worked as an overnight security guard. Went through school. I ended up working those nights. You know, it was like midnight to 6 a.m. Ooh. And then I did night school also. And so I kind of worked my way through school doing the security guard thing. Then I took a job at Shields and selling stuff, which was awesome. That was really like the first time that like I remember selling like a baseball bat and I was like, oh fuck yes. Like I sold a baseball bat and I was like, yes. I got like that high that you get when you sell something, totally. And I was like, all right.
So your first thing was a baseball bat. Oh, that's great. You know what mine was?
What?
It was a website.
Was it?
Oh my gosh, I'll never forget. It was a website.
How shitty was that website?
Oh, actually not that bad. I feel like I did
really?
a pretty decent job.
What was it?
Like I probably, you know, they say like you should be embarrassed by your early version of your work. Like, yeah, of course, like I'm embarrassed of it comparatively now. But like for where I was, like I worked my butt off to make sure that thing was clean. It was very simple, so that not a lot of room to mess it up. Like there's a lot of like heavy word websites where it's like a lot of room to screw up. Yeah. This one didn't have very much room to screw up, so I felt pretty okay about it. But yeah, I'll never forget that.
How much money did you make?
It was $1,000.
Wow.
And I guarantee I didn't take any profit from that. It was just survival money. But that's just what you do at the beginning.
That's amazing. Yeah, how old were you?
I was 25.
That's the best.
Yeah.
Like that moment where you go, oh, I can ask someone to buy something for me. Like I can sell this ticket and then I'll create it. And then I get to keep all the money. And then later you're like, oh, I was supposed to pay taxes.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. So you sold a baseball bat and your whole life changed.
Yeah.
Right? We were there.
No, that's exactly it.
And then what was that feeling like? Like what was that the feeling of like, this is possible, or, you know, another feeling of understanding of
it was legit like a new addiction. For me, it was legit. Yeah, you just replaced the addiction. I got like that dopamine hit, right? Like I got a dopamine hit from selling that, and I was like, "Oh, like I can do this," right? And that's when I became obsessed with business. Yeah. For the first time, I was like, "Wow, like this is a world where I can really excel. Like as long as I can sell something, I can always get someone to fulfill for me, right?
Yeah.
And so
your whole life's been that ever since.
Yeah, exactly.
That's so true though. Yeah, that's super interesting.
Exactly.
Wow. So job as Shields after Windstream and just consistently kind of working your way up. What did you do after college?
Well, during college, I had a few jobs. So there was another one where I worked in the call center at a surety life insurance company. I wasn't exactly like the best customer service person. And then
trying to sell them stuff.
Right. Exactly. I actually made a relationship with the guy who ended up hiring me later. But I worked in that call center, and then I realized like, I really want to do something interesting with my life. And I still didn't see like the opportunity for me to go into business for myself at that point in time. And so,
and how old were you?
Gosh, I was 20.
22?
Yeah, 22, something
like that.
But
you did you know you wanted to, but you didn't see the spot available?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. We were different that way. So it's interesting.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was reading Entrepreneur Magazine, like absolutely knew that I wanted to. I just didn't see my opening. And so I went to work for a U.S. Senator, Mike Johans. Worked for Mike Johans for two years or so. During that, I took a summer off, went out to Connecticut and worked at an SAT preparatory company called Access America, which was all international students that had parents that were extremely wealthy, paying for them to learn how to hack the SAT to get into good U.S. universities. And that's where I met my wife. And
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I talked her into coming back to Nebraska with me.
Was she a fellow instructor there? Or?
Yeah, so I wasn't an instructor. She was an instructor, so she was helping teach the kids really solid English foundation. And I went there to be a camp counselor.
Love it.
And the person that was leading the entire thing like had a nervous breakdown. So the guy that owned the thing like looked at me and he was like, "Can you do this?" And I was like, "How much are you going to pay me?" Right. And so I took the position, and then I at that point in time, I was in charge for a summer of 55 international students in a dormitory, which you can imagine the types of things that happened there. Right.
Oh my gosh,
it was just absolutely ridiculous. It was like all bets are off. Like I didn't sleep for 3 months straight because all I was trying to do was keep kids out of being in rooms together and
oh yeah.
It was crazy.
Yeah, just constant alarms going off in your head.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So they ship their kids in, and then these kids basically just have an intensive where they're don't suck at the SAT.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's what they're sold.
It's what they're sold.
Yeah, that's what they're sold. Most of the parents ended up buying buildings, right, to get them into the universities, I think, in the end.
That's what you do.
But it was super interesting. There were a bunch of oligarchs. Kids there, and these kids from Kazakhstan that were just hilarious. I had a really amazing sweet kid named Jean-Baptiste Casanova.
That's his real name.
Yeah, from the south of France. And he was just it's a totally different world being around these kids, having been a kid from Lincoln, Nebraska, right? And so I kind of got a look into that world, and I was like, wow, I would really like to be one of your parents, right? At that point in time.
Yeah.
Talk my wife into coming back to Nebraska with me, go back to work for the senator for another year. They gave me a full-time job doing that. And post all of that, is when I went into financial services and started my decade in financial services. Emeritus shipped me out to Seattle, Washington, where I worked on the Seattle, Oregon territory. From there, I really realized in that environment that I didn't necessarily have control over my future and my financial destiny. And so that's when I went into financial advisory.
Okay. One taste closer to
entrepreneurship, right? And I couldn't even handle that. I couldn't even handle being one step closer to entrepreneurship. I had
Why do you say that?
Because being in financial advisory, there was so much regulatory stuff that like I wasn't able to be like a free creative entrepreneur, right? Like I had to pass so many things through compliance and so on and so forth, which drove me absolutely nuts. I couldn't handle it. And I had to do things a certain way in order to represent the firm and the broker dealer and so on and so forth. And I just wanted to do things my way, right?
I want to take a pause and recognize the fact that you started off when you were a kid. I think it was the 5th grade, 4th grade. You said that basically they pulled you out of a class because you found out you were dyslexic. And now you're in your mid-20s and you're already looking over really complex documentation, submitting things for compliance for financial advisory. So for anybody that either has a kid that has been diagnosed with dyslexia or think that they've had dyslexia in their life, like that should be a lesson to you guys. Like it is the limitations you put on yourself. Like there's always ways you can learn it. There's always ways you can get around it. So how do you deal with that? Like how did you have someone like call you and explain that to a deeper level, or were you just are you an auditory learner?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I'm auditory visual.
Gotcha.
Drawings and so on and so forth.
I can pick something up 10 times faster with a drawing.
Absolutely. And that's how I can like convey what it is that I'm thinking also. I did learn how to process information, reading, right? And like worked really, really hard at that. Like my parents would definitely say that like I'm the most voracious reader in my family. I know that books are, I mean, like think about this for a second. Like there's a book called Meditations, and that's Marcus Aurelius. And like you can open up that book and you can learn lessons from Marcus a fucking Aurelius, right? And like people don't pick up that book. Like what the fuck's wrong with you?
I have that book.
You know?
It's crazy. It's crazy. He was the most powerful man in the world. Of the free world.
Yeah.
Like hands down, not even close. He was the most powerful. And he was so powerful, he had to have somebody follow him around and like tap him on the shoulder and say, "You're human. You're a human being. You're mortal." That's what he said, right? You're mortal.
Right.
You're mortal. Like imagine that for a second.
That's
and
so
that guy wrote a
remarkable.
book called Meditations. I highly recommend people go take a look at that. I actually picked it up when I first my first few months in entrepreneurship. Didn't understand any of it, so I need to go reread it again. But I did try and read it. It's relatively deep read. I mean, like understanding the context of Mark, who he was, is very important though.
Right.
Of like, yeah.
I mean, like it's just like this. It's this remarkable thing. Like there are all of these texts, like, in some way, in some form, you have to be able to get yourself to process the information that is necessary in order to learn, grow, be a lifelong learner. And then like in those situations where you do have difficulties, there are a few things that are true. Like number one is you have to learn how to do things on your own, right? Like, so there's these years, you just don't have assistance. Like people aren't going to do stuff for you.
Yeah.
You don't have money to pay people to do them for you. So you do them yourself. But then is when, once you learn the fundamentals of all of those things, that's the point where you could start utilizing, leverage in order to hire other people to do those things for you that can do them better and help you move quicker, right? And I think that that's what most people miss, is that there really is this opportunity where you have, and I don't have like someone following me around reading a book to me, but I sure do listen to Audible a lot. So.
Yeah, totally. And that constant input, right? That constant download of information is so critical, because I know a ton of people that frankly, like they've stopped learning after high school and it shows, right? There is a certain point where people are just like, I'm at where I'm at, kind of had enough of this whole learning thing. And I feel for those people. I really feel bad when I think about it, because it's just, there's so much wisdom that you're missing out on, and happiness that comes from that wisdom, and the money is aside from that, just the wisdom piece of it knowing how to navigate the world better. Like so much of that's in there. And I totally hear what you're saying with that. That's good.
Yeah. Well, can you imagine just living a life where you're at a standstill on the knowledge that you're consuming? Like that is, to me, like that would be such a hard life to live. And I think that the difference between, I look at all of my friends who are much more successful than I am, is like they are dedicated. They are dedicated to learning new things. Like it's not about the money. Life isn't about the money, but it's about learning and growing and continuing to learn and grow, and then to take those things and put them into practical application where it can create movement and momentum in their lives.
Yeah. And when you were in financial services, and how long were you in before you kind of started to realize like, oh man, I thought this was it, but this isn't it?
I was pretty far in, right? Like I had been
9 years.
Yeah. I was 8 or 9 years, something, maybe 10.
Cause I had met you around that time. That was when we met, right?
I mean, the thing that kept me there was I had like a lot of freedom. for having a job.
And you knew a lot of really cool people. Like it was not a normal career by any means.
No, I mean, like I was still doing things very different than other financial advisors. And like, it was I was working with like all entrepreneurs. Right. And so like, I didn't even take clients that weren't entrepreneurs. Like I only worked with entrepreneurs. And by the way, like I was making most of my money not doing financial advisory, coaching people. Coaching people as entrepreneurs on operational, operating systems and how it is that they could sell more through, through using free focus buffer days and like certain question sets and things like that. And so I was actually like making most of my money coaching people, even though I was in financial advisory. And like, I remember my boss, Pat Keating, being like, do you want to be a financial advisor or do you want to be like a market developer? And I was sitting there and like the right answer was like, I want to be a financial advisor. But like I was sitting there going like, I want to be a market developer, right? Like that's what that's what I did in the firm was like, what I did really well was build relationships with people in the community, bring in new clients. And it wasn't necessarily about managing the money. It was about bringing in the new clients, serving the new clients, helping them learn what they needed to do in order to grow. And like, that's how I met Neil Amy, at Sprius and ended up being like chief strategist at Sprius. He was a financial advisory client that hired me to build relationships for him. Right. So like at the end of the day, he wasn't even paying me for what I did. Right. He was paying me to build relationships.
The gift is connected. Like you're a super connector.
Yeah.
And good on him. Shout out to Neil.
Thanks, Neil.
We know
Appreciate
Neil's going to
bro.
listen to this. But that's totally good on him for recognizing that is you have a gift to build relationships. And like that, it's funny how you talked about how the disconnectedness of like an addiction, you liken addiction to being disconnected. And so you're on this constant path of just like connecting people, connecting yourself to new people, connecting other people together. And I've watched it happen, and you literally live that out, because the first day I met you, first of all, you coached me. I don't know if you remember that or not, but you actually sat me down and you're like, well, what are your goals? I'm like, I have no idea. And I had to like go back home and think about it. And I think I did write some down.
Let's do it. No. Let's do it. All right. So
do you remember?
No, I know the exact questions that I asked you.
Oh my gosh.
So, but we're going to do it in the present. Okay.
Okay.
So Landon, what are your greatest concerns right now?
My greatest concerns right now. I would say my greatest concerns right now are not becoming the best version of myself in this current moment. Not necessarily like, oh, I didn't make X amount of money, but if I had the potential to make $3 million, or if I had the potential to help or give away $300,000 with, whether it be through tithing, whether it be through, just various charities or helping people or giving of my time, I look at that as like, if I'm not fulfilling that true potential, like that's my greatest concern. That's where I'm at.
Where do you think that comes from?
Fulfillment is joy and happiness. Mm-hmm. And so, like becoming wealthy, growing a successful business, having a large team, those are all things that are like kind of factors that play into fulfillment. Mm-hmm. And then like my relationship with God, my relationship with my girlfriend, my relationship with my family, like all of those things are all together inside of that. There's not one that's above the other. It's just, there is, but inside of that hierarchy, all of those things lead to fulfillment. And I think there's ones you can control and there's ones you can't control. So I just kind of try and focus on those.
Mm. What do you think's going well right now?
Learning, like focusing on learning and spending money. Spending money to save time is going very well right now. So this is a really good lesson too for entrepreneurs that are listening to this. You pay for life lessons in one of two ways. You pay for life lessons through doing the wrong things over and over and over again until you do the right thing, which is the cost of time, which is the most valuable asset you have, or you pay someone else that's actually went out there and done it to teach you how to do it and shorten that timeline. So you trade money for time. And so when people say you can't buy back your time, that's actually false. You definitely can.
Absolutely. You can.
You totally can. So
that's the most valuable thing you can buy.
100%. Yeah. So, people wonder like, oh man, how is Uber and Lyft valued so high? Or, why are these tech companies valued so high? It's because they save us time. And we will give an outrageous amount of money for something that buys us back our time. So I would say the one thing I've done a really good job of in the last 18 months is spending money to save time, to go faster or further.
Interesting. And so like, what are the things that have to be true over the next year for you to feel like you've been successful?
Okay. I will have to launch a successful consulting business, put 120 new clients into that consulting business where I'm going to coach young videographers and video production companies on how to basically go from freelancers to founders through sales systems and operations. I need to get 120 people into that. The agency, Grindstone, the actual agency work that we do needs to double again in the next year. So the next 365 days. And then I would say just continuing to move things further and faster with family and like my relationship with my girlfriend, just keeping those very heavily balanced inside of like there's two things. There's goals and constraints, right? Goals are what you want. Constraints are what you have to stay in the lines of to get those things. And so my goal, say my goal is $2 million in top line or $3 million in top line revenue for Grindstone. The constraint is I can't work 80 hours a week to get that. So I think about it a lot more as goals and constraints and not just like targets.
Where do you have the most time drain right now in Grindstone?
So we've done a really good job at ridding ourselves of this, but the most time drain in this business right now
for you,
for me is doing too many different versions of things instead of doing one thing really, really well. And so we're in this focus period in the last 8 months. We've done a better job every single month. I've been kind of watching this is narrowing down the services that we offer to a very specific subset of the market and getting more dialed into exactly who we're serving and becoming an expert at serving that exact archetype of a client rather than just being all things to all people.
And what do you think? What is that archetype? What's your perfect archetype? Like Grindstone just, destroys.
Yeah. So the direction we're heading with that right now is we're heading directly into the blue collar market. So we've done a lot of this already. I'm not going to act like we haven't done this in the last 3 years, but it's now making more of a concerted effort to say we're going to work directly with more construction companies, blue collar businesses, and manufacturers, et cetera, so that we can focus directly on serving their specific needs inside of that blue collar contractor type niche. Now that said, we still have like a referral arm of our business that's very healthy where like we do great work for people and they tell a bunch of people about it and that work comes in. That will never stop. So there will always be that like that bucket of like people that come in and we learn their world and then help them. But as far as like who we're directly targeting and marketing to, it's that of what you just said.
Yeah, I mean, well, I love that distinction is because, there are different levels of the funnel. And, the goal is to get people in that funnel, referring people over, so on and so forth. But like you have to go out and you have to decide who it is that you're going to spend on, that you're going to go out and get and pull into that funnel, into that circle of people. And you continue to nurture this group of people, but you have to go out and find those people. And so, as far as like that sales process goes, how do you see that working, right? Like what are the mechanisms that are going to allow you to grow that portion of your business, going out and getting those blue collar industries?
High value, high ticket investment type products that we're going to sell. So, in order to escape a commoditized market, you have to offer something that your other competitors are not going to offer. So for instance, when we approach the construction, manufacturing, and agricultural niches, which is the three that we have outside of our referral bucket, like I talked about, having a very specific offering in that market that transcends just we're a video company to becoming we're a solution provider for this very specific problem that you have. Right now, that problem is looking like safety because it's such a high value investment. So like every construction company, every manufacturing company, and ag company, they spend a ton of money on safety with their eyes closed. And so the way I look at that is like just kind of like talking out loud here. I've never shared this with anybody, but
I love it.
The way I look at that is like, and I want people to take from this is there's a book called $100 Million Offers by Alex Hormozi, which is one of the greatest books I've ever read on developing an offer. Because in order to escape a commoditized market, you have to show that you're different than everybody else in your market. So videographers are a dime a dozen. Production companies are a dime a dozen. They're freaking everywhere. And you can throw a rock and hit 7 of them. But someone that specifically provides a safety solution with a learning management system to teach onboarding SOPs and construction safety to construction companies is a very unique problem that someone is solving, which is much different than just being a videographer. And so what I would recommend to anybody that's listening to this right now is ask yourself the question, how are you being commoditized and how can you escape that commoditization by increasing your value that you provide, say like 10x. If you increase the value provided by 10x, that would allow you to then charge, 10x or 20x for that, right? And obviously the value has to supersede the money or no one's going to buy it. But asking yourself the question like, okay, well, if I do something simple, so I help people with like live streams. Well, I'm gonna critique your live stream video and tell you how it could have been better. That's the low ticket offer. And then there's the high ticket offer, which is I'm gonna show up at your house. I'm gonna build you a production studio. I'm gonna record the first one with you, and we're gonna make sure this is the perfect production studio environment for your home office. We're doing a lot of studio build outs right now at Grindstone. Like people are calling us and saying, hey, like I want a home studio built in my office, and you clearly know about podcasting. Like, can you come help me? So that's a done for you offer that is 10 times more valuable than just hopping on a phone call with me and talking about how did the call go. Right. So that's it's an okay example, but yeah, doing the 1/10 and the 10x rule is an example from that book, $100 Million Offers. And it's, if you have your core offer today, what could you do for 1/10 of the cost? And what could you do if you 10x'd your cost? Right. So like how great of a service could you provide if you actually charge 10 times what you're charging today? That is a valuable question.
I love that.
Because if you think about it, if you're charging, so say you have a $10,000 solution and if it's video, right? And for $100,000, you could then afford to license a software for the learning management system if you're doing trainings. You could do, oh my gosh, the production capability of 10x, 10 times higher production. You could have like top level actors in your video. I mean, like there's so many different things you can provide, but you just ask yourself the question like, okay, well, if I want to make X amount of money, how do I 10x what I'm currently offering to the market in terms of value to get that dollar to where the market isn't like, oh, you're just expensive. It's like, no, you're a premium, but you also You come with so much more additional value than any of your competitors. You're nothing like the rest of the videographers.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the season that we're in right now. That's what we're trying to further and further define every single day, is how do we get out of this commoditization of videographers and production agencies?
I love that. Do you have any major themes that you think?
This safety one is the first one that came up. And I'm in discovery mode with this, like, to be completely transparent with everybody. You know, we're learning. Like, we're not perfect at it yet. We don't exactly know.
What would be how would you identify whether or not someone has that need?
You literally talk to them. You ask them, like, what problems you have in your market.
What are the problems that they have?
You ask them, but like, if you're applying this to, like, say somebody that's listening, you go ask them the question of, like, what problems are you running into? So the best example of this, this is really going off course bit, but
no, I like it.
The best example of this would be the guy from Quantified Ag, and my sister's gonna kill
Vishal.
him. Vishal, yes, yeah. Vishal. So Vishal didn't actually start off in doing anything agriculture related at all. He just knew we had a lot of cattle producers in the state and knew there was a lot of farmers. Mm-hmm. And so he went and asked them, he's like, what's your biggest problem right now? What's your biggest problem? He went and interviewed a bunch of farmers. Mm-hmm. And they said their biggest issue was cattle were actually faking like they were healthy when they would go through the scanning gates to protect themselves from getting early slaughter. So like, they have enough of an idea to know, okay, I have to, like, stand up straight, you know, calm my body temperature down or whatever they were doing, right, to avoid detection that they were sick. Mm-hmm. And so the problem that they kept coming back with is, like, we can't read our cattle well enough to, like, see if they're sick or not. And so he developed an ear tag that would actually send out information on a daily basis, or multiple times a day. And it would have measurements like when they would bend down to feed, how long they would be down to feed. And it would actually have a gyro, is it gyroscope? Is that what it's called inside of it? Where it would detect, like, a head bob for how many times they're feeding, body temperature. So when they get hot and they're ruminating, like, that's a sign of health, and, like, how hot their body temperature gets tells you how healthy they are. All of these different factors determine that, but that dude didn't have anything to do with ag. Mm-hmm. He just asked them what their problems were. He created a solution. They sold his company for a ton of money. So, you know, people make it really complicated, and they're like, oh, you have to fall in love with this, and you have to be in love with your industry or whatever. It's like, that dude wasn't. He literally was just like, all right, well, like, you have a problem. How can I make something to solve it? And then there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. So would this be for your specific offering? Would it be best to identify companies that already are in pain, like that have had some sort of an issue with safety? Yeah,
probably. I would say their urgency is higher. If they recently have had any sort of lapse in safety, or safety is becoming a larger initiative, but sadly that means somebody either got hurt or killed. You know, so it's a tough subject when you go approach them about it.
So here's the question. This is where this entire thing was going, right? Is what if you were able to pull information from a news feed, an RSS feed, at scale, in order to identify on a day-by-day basis every single opportunity for every single construction company or whatever that has some sort of a safety issue, identify that, pull specific information from that article, and then feed it into a robot that goes out and reaches out as you to those people and says, you have this issue, this issue, this issue, this issue. Let's have a conversation. I can help you with this, 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 and this. And that's what we do. Right.
Yeah.
And so
that was a huge mic drop moment for Sully, just subtly dropping exactly what Thumos and, oh my gosh. So we just opened up the Pandora's box here, the Darkmatter. I'm so excited to talk about this. So yes, exactly. That's exactly what would be valuable, right? Understanding who recently had high urgency to look into safety, who's being audited by OSHA, who's being looked at for fines. I mean, like, yes, all those things matter, because $100,000 fine is very real for a construction company, huge construction companies. So if you can save them that, and then more importantly, like, save lives, it's all worth it.
That's exactly right. And so, at the end of the day, there's this opportunity, right, Landon, for you to buy your time back.
Right.
to have the research done for you,
Yeah.
to automate the outreach, right? And that's what we would be capable of doing for Grindstone.
Yeah, we're about to be in talks with that, so it's a good sales pitch. And that's and the reason, to be completely frank with you, the reason we didn't approach you yet, and because I always knew it would happen, was because I wanted to have a very specific offer in mind, and I didn't think like a brand video or a culture video was specific enough. I told myself, like, we have to approach the market from an expertise perspective. I have expertise in ag and manufacturing. My sister has off the charts expertise in construction. She worked in for Stanley Black & Decker for 10 years. So the connections are all there, the expertise, everything that's available. But I wanted to bring an offer to the market to where I was like, okay, we have a very specific problem that we're solving. And now we basically unleash all of the sales and marketing copy to then go talk to these people directly.
That's the
future of selling and marketing, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I think that especially in the high ticket B2B space, is like we have to be able to have curated conversations with people, customized conversations that are at the end of the day are achieving the type of scale, which is not possible in B2B today. And other than that, like, that specification that you're talking about, like, it's just so important for marketing agencies, because there are so many marketing agencies in the world that are competing. Like, you have to have your focus, your thing. And so, like, you look at Firespring and like what they've done. The reason why they've been able to do what they've done is has everything to do with like focusing on nonprofits and B Corps, right? And leaning into that social sustainability focus.
Yeah, that's a really good segue to talk about what you do. Yeah. And so the last time we talked about you were working for a financial services company, and in financial advisory, you're like flirting with the idea of coaching people, and you're like, okay, then you end up at Sprius for a little while, working with Neil. And then what happens?
Yeah. So, well, that entire time I was also carrying other clients than just Sprius. And so at that point in time, I was really like a strategist for several different companies, helping them build revenue generation channels and new relationships. Really where things started to change. I mean, there was a point in time just a few years ago where, like, I was working with a friend that has a fiber optics company out of Kansas, and I was making cold calls on Saturday to sell fiber to homes, right? And just for one of my 5 clients, right? And so I was really hustling and earning my dollars. Andy, my CIO, became a free agent right at the beginning of the pandemic. Shit was really hitting the fan. And there was absolutely no certainty, but there was one thing that I was certain about, was that I could do really amazing things with what Andy's capable of and Andy's brain, and that he would be able to move the needle with me, like, really, really well. And so at that point in time, I gave myself a massive pay cut and paid Andy to come on board. And that was the first time that I really bet on myself. At that point in time, before that, I had no technical components of what I was doing at the company. And we really leaned into that, though, and started just building shit, right? Like building shit that could create capabilities. And so number one was building data scrapers and aggregating data in order to build databases and selling that data to people. And then we started doing automated outreach with LinkedIn for ourselves, just because we figured out about it, and we kept changing and building on those capabilities and utilizing those bots. Then we moved into email and automating email and outreach, and then building communities for our clients. And so we really have these three different entities, these 3 different companies today. One of them is Soter.ai, which is a mass data aggregation firm. We build massive data feeds for companies that are either building up some sort of a database, reselling the data to massive companies like Goldman Sachs, or they have some sort of, they're like a Series A, Series B, Silicon Valley startup that need some sort of an ongoing data feed, data hose that's feeding some sort of a software or analytics software.
Can you give an example of that? Because people probably don't know what that means.
Yeah, I mean, so like, for example,
I have no idea what that means until you explain it to me.
No. Think about this, for example. So like if you go, if you look up information on Crunchbase, right? Mm-hmm. And there's information on you, there's information on me, there's information on other people, their projected revenues, there's contact information on these things, like all kinds of information that you can get. Well, we're going out and aggregating that information from websites and then feeding that information to websites like that, so that then it can be on there and updated in a live fashion, right? Yeah. And so, we have clients that we're pulling 2 million profiles off of LinkedIn per month, type of thing. And then, there's our Thumos. Thumos is the business intelligence agency side of things. That's the one where we're mostly building databases, and then we're running the automations for people. And then we're building community and pulling relationships down funnel for them to their sales team. And then the opportunities are processed. And so we have about 37 different automation tools that we utilize in that toolkit that we, and we build custom kits for each one of our clients. Our clients are usually around like $5,000 to $7,000 a month is what we do this for. Some of them have like multiple salespeople, which makes it a little bit more expensive. But what we're doing is, for example, this is my favorite example, is for a client, we aggregated every single person that owns a plane in the United States. And so we went to the FAA website. Yeah. We did a data scrape of every single person that owns a private jet. And then we cross-referenced that with every single person that has a C corporation. We concatenated that data in order to create a database of people that have those two qualities, which is obviously high net worth people that usually own tech companies. And then we... And then we went and got more information, more personal information on them by aggregating their LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and so on.
You created a persona.
Yeah, exactly.
You have like exact persona information with high degrees of relatedness between human beings. And so you understand this customer perfectly. That's what it comes down to.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And then we automate outreach to that customer and utilize the data from that in order to better inform ourselves on the outreach that we're doing. So we build a bot that's either in the name of a salesperson or the founder of the firm that we're working with, or we create a completely fake persona and just say like, in that automated outreach, I am an automation built by XYZ company, so that it's transparent and we're not like, pulling the wool over people's eyes, right? And automate outreach that way with personalized information. And so picture a form email, picture a form LinkedIn that has all of these variables that can be filled in. Like, so for like a digital agency, I just sent this to you today. A digital agency, we can say you do or don't have Pixel, you do or don't have Google Analytics, you do or don't have a privacy policy, you do or don't have a copyright. And have all of those things listed like a site audit, but in paragraph form coming from you. And then we have a screenshot of, like Facebook Pixel Helper. Yeah. So like a snapshot of Facebook Pixel Helper for all of those thousands of people that we're sending that to, so that it looks like you went to their website.
Oh my gosh.
And you noticed that their pixel's misfiring. Yeah. And so like now you're reaching out to the owner of that firm, they're going to have a conversation with the digital agency that they're working with right now because things aren't tuned in and they're spending more money than they should be. And they're going to be calling Landon Rhodes. So like, that's what we do at Thumos, right?
That's one of the companies.
And then just last month, I started a little group called Darkmatter. It's a private group of people that have dedicated their lives to building intelligent client acquisition channels. We have people from Fortune 100, people that own billion-dollar P&Ls at Fortune 100 companies in the marketing or digital agency or digital division. And then like people who are strategists, people who are CEOs of agencies or digital agencies. And it's a place for sharing information and having conversations about what are the most like advanced ways of building client acquisition channels in the world, right? Wow. And so that's what Darkmatter has been. It's an interesting community. We have people from all over the world in it so far. There are about 60 people that are involved. And I'm looking forward to seeing like what comes from that.
That is fascinating. So you've built, again, going from the early part of this story where we talked about the Eric Sullivan sitting in class, struggling to read. Mm-hmm. You found out you have dyslexia, then going into the program, failing DARE, dealing with substance abuse, not really finding out who you were until later, until about your early 20s, and then kind of figuring out who you were for the next decade, but then really figuring out who that version of Eric Sullivan was when you started your companies. And I just love your evolution. You've just always been so like transparent about it. And you caught a little bit in this interview, guys, of like Eric can't help himself but ask questions about other people of like where they're at, because it's just like the internal coach that you carry around with you all the time. Like I love that, because that's exactly how every conversation goes when we talk. Like it's the Enneagram 8 meme. Instagram account talks about this. Like, hey, I'm an Enneagram 8. What's your first name? What's your deepest fear? Like you jump right in to the most like crushing conversations that could either like, for most people it'd be like, why would you ask me that? But then for like the right person, it's like, well, I've really been dealing with self-doubt and personal hatred, like anything like that, because it goes so deep, right?
Well, the super important part is like, I really believe this is like a science, and everyone should check out my Medium page, because I've like outlined all of this. But I think that there's like a process to how it is that you can build relationships with people. And the first thing is you come in like we did and you share all of your vulnerabilities. Just put all of your vulnerabilities on the table so that someone's comfortable having an intimate conversation with you. And then asking them about their concerns so that they can drive the conversation, right?
That's good.
And then asking them what's going well, right? And that's what's exciting to them. That's what's, they're building confidence in that moment, and you're helping them build confidence. And then you ask them what it is that they want to achieve over a specific period of time. And you'll find that people will tell you everything that they want to achieve over a certain period of time. And then that gives you the opportunity to figure out how it is that you can serve them, right? And this is something that can be done in so many different mediums. Like, it's not just in a conversation like this. Like, when we think about the components of pretty much anything that works in this world, we have sensors, right? We have actuators, and then we have processors, we have memory, right? And everything kind of actually interacts in that type of a way. And so like what you have to do is you have to take in that information, you have to process that information, and then you have to output that information into actionables that will help them get to the next steps. And if you do that correctly, usually you will be able to serve someone somehow. And so it's not about selling your service. It's about selling what is it that someone needs, right? And then how is it that you can apply your capabilities to get them there? And people are really open to that conversation instead of what it is that you have to offer them.
Mic drop. That was really good. Holy smokes. Yeah, but that totally makes sense. Why you've been able to connect with so many people and people that I look up to and respect in a very big way. Like, I can name countless people, and they'll be like, oh, you know, Eric Sullivan. And then like that opens up a whole new degree of comfortability with that person. And it's fascinating because they're just, they trust you more because we don't really share a lot of time with people that we don't intend on spending more time with in the future, or that we trust, that we don't trust. So I think that is one reason, like it's, oh, this guy respects himself. He respects his time and he must know Eric. Like it's kind of, these two things have to be true for that to go forward. And, but that's because you've made it so clear about what you want to do. And I love this too. Your emails, like automated email outreach from you, personal stuff. I love that. And I think it's absolutely brilliant just having having an email that's going out every quarter and be like, hey, just wondering how I can serve you. And being honest about like, hey, I just want to make an effort to stay in connection with you.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people lose relationships and kind of, life comes in waves, like where you are with a certain amount of a group of people over here for a while and then kind of shift over here and you're with those people for a while and kind of hot and heavy in that way. But like you make it a point to say, I'm going to reach out to all these people on a quarterly basis or a monthly, even annual basis all the time so that we can keep this relationship.
Yeah. I think and that's my mission in life, is to help people continue to be able to build on that. There's Dunbar's law, which basically says like we can carry a certain number of relationships, right? At the end of the day. But I think that we can expand that. Like we have all of these resources at our fingertips to be able to expand the amount of people that we're in connection with and the amount of people that we love and that love us, right? And we look at technology, I think, the wrong way. Like we look at technology as if it's something that can just go do a task for us in like a not so human kind of way, right? But it can enable us to be more human with other people also.
Exactly. Human intent. Like it's expanding human intent to go do things.
And like that's what you do for a living, is you humanize people through technology, right? That's what I do for a living also. And so like, how is it that we take and we build technologies that help us scale our ability to touch other people and to help other people and to care about other people and move forward with that intent instead of, the intent that we've had so far, which is just to automate tasks, right? It's not just about automating tasks. It's about how is it that we scale the human, their abilities, and like bring more love into the world through technology. And when we start to humanize all of that, I think we truly have something special.
That's good. That's good. I'm going to ask you a few questions at the end to kind of wrap up here. But before we do that, where can people find you? How do they get a hold of you if they want to work with Thumos, Soter, or get involved with Darkmatter somehow?
Yeah. So Thumos.io, Thumos.io. Whenever I'm recording, I always think you're dyslexic. Don't mess this up. Soter.ai, Soter.ai. This is my worst nightmare. And then for Darkmatter, reach out to me. Eric at Thumos.io is my email, and feel free to reach out to me and we can have a conversation over what that looks like.
Is Thumos have to do with the chariot thing that we talked about?
Yes. Yeah.
The blank of the chariot. It's the
allegory.
The allegory. It was the word I couldn't remember. The allegory of the chariot. Do you want to like walk through that a little bit? Because I think that's a super cool story. Yeah.
Well, so Thumos, Landon knows this. Like I had significant trouble naming my firm. Like I was very,
it matters so much.
And I was very into it. And I finally landed on something that I found years ago, which is the allegory of the chariot. In the allegory of the chariot, there are a few different things. So there's a charioteer, and then there are these two horses, a white horse and a black horse. And the chariot represents logic, which is, in in my thought process is the entrepreneur, and the entrepreneur is guiding, these two things that are very, very much built on human emotion. One of them is Thumos, which is actually lost. That's the white horse. It's a lost word that was a Greek word long ago, that there is nothing to explain it in the English dictionary. But like at the end of the day, the closest definition that you could have is a spiritedness, like a righteousness. And it is the horse that guides the chariot up toward the heavens and self-actualization. And then there's this dark horse, which represents human appetite, which drives the chariot down toward the ground and eventually can cause wreckage and crash. And so it's the charioteer's job to keep these two horses in alignment. And Thumos, I believe, represents that guide that helps bring the power to the entrepreneur, that drives their growth, right? Their achievement, self-actualization drives them toward the heavens. And the human appetite side of things is something that's obviously theirs to keep in check. But we want to be a growth engine of good for the entrepreneur.
I really like that though, and I'm glad that you had a chance to explain that, because I remember the first time you told me about it. It's basically like you have the white horse that's keeping the darker side of your personality, or like the more reckless side of your personality, in line. And that's like the coaching that I think you provided the first time I met you, of like, I'm gonna guide you through, because you don't know what you're doing right now. I know a lot of people that know what they're doing, and I kind of know what I'm doing, but I'm gonna guide us through this direction. And I think you've done that for a lot of people, dude. That's
well, I
super cool.
think that's actually like the most important thing. I mean, I still very much see that being the ally of the entrepreneur as my duty. I've always felt that I don't want to build $1 billion company, but I want to help people that are building kingdoms of good. And so, last night I was, talking to a friend of mine down in Texas that's going through a hard time, that is a client, and, just spending time with someone is really important, especially other entrepreneurs. And then today, another guy, actually he's in Texas too. Same thing, he's going through a difficult time, and I just want to be there for him and help guide them through. And so like, that's the true work, is, being with other people and being a resource to other people and helping those other people. And it goes far beyond what our capabilities are. From a technological standpoint, or driving leads or revenue, it's also just about sitting and being a human with other humans.
Man, that's good. That's real good. Let's wrap up with a few kind of spitfire questions here. So, 2 books changed your life.
Ooh, Think and Grow Rich, and Principles.
Oh, interesting. I thought you were going to say Bhagavad Gita. Is that's
the Gita definitely changed my life.
Yeah, I think you remember that one you recommended to me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the Gita. I changed my
changed my mind. Those books, by the way,
you could say like 5 other books.
I have Principles on my bookshelf in there, and Think and Grow Rich is one of the first books I ever read about entrepreneurship.
And it changed your life, didn't it?
Yeah, and what's interesting is I remember more from the book about the devil. What's the devil? It's
but it's still Napoleon Hill.
It's Napoleon Hill's book about basically
a conversation with the devil.
He has a conversation with the devil, and he says he has a conversation with the devil, talking about like, what does the devil hate and what does the devil love? Obviously, you want to do things that the devil hates, but it goes through and he has this really weird cathartic experience where he has a conversation with the devil, or so he believed, and his family members refused to publish the book until after he died. Because they're like, dude, you're a crazy crucified for this. Yeah, like you're crazy. We'll have to think of the title of that, but it's something to do with Napoleon Hill and basically a conversation with the devil, which is, obviously I'm a very big believer in, getting the word on a daily basis. But that book was one of the first ones that I ever read about, avoiding the pitfalls of the negative parts of personality. But Napoleon Hill, nonetheless, phenomenal author.
Yeah, absolutely. And that book was like at that first turning point in my life, like when I was working overnight. That's what I was reading as I was a security guard. And
Napoleon Hill.
Yeah, and it was really the first time that I really started reading, right? Like really, I read that and it made me a voracious reader.
That's good. That's good. One piece of advice that you would give to a new entrepreneur and one piece of advice you give to somebody that's been in the game for a while.
So, well, for a new entrepreneur, I mean, the first thing that I would say is just get your reps under your belt. Just do, just do stuff. Like, don't sit still. Keep moving. Keep creating things, putting them out there, and make sure that you're selling things. I see so many, and this has been the case since when I started my company, or a lot of my friends were starting their companies. I mean, I see the difference between the ones that are successful and the ones that aren't. And, at the end of the day, there are the ones that figure out how it is that they're going to ask people for checks, and then they figure out how to fulfill, and they keep figuring new things out and then reselling it, and then figuring something out and reselling it. And they build people things of value while they're building their valuable, scalable product with the money that people are giving them. And then there are the people who sit there and they either get other people's money and sit on it and keep messing around with product market fit, all of these things. And so at the end of the day, do stuff, ask people for money, figure out how to build them stuff, be a person of your word, and keep growing, but make sure that you're asking for money. For people that have been entrepreneurs for some time, I would say don't forget about yourself. And this is just like from my experience, right? Like I spent so much time building my professional self and trying to serve other people and help other people and make sure that my team's okay and all of these things, that there have been points where I lost sight of like my own well-being, and my own well-being has suffered quite a bit. And I think that we as entrepreneurs need to remember that we too deserve grace.
Yep.
And
self-care.
And self-care. And I think that people really get it wrong a lot of the time. There are entrepreneurs that absolutely are not great people. But I think most entrepreneurs are actually driven by helping other people. And there's a lot of sacrifice involved in building something. And usually the entrepreneur really does eat last. And don't forget to take care of yourself along the way.
I love that. One addition to that is I heard Taylor Welch say in a podcast that entrepreneurs are like a McLaren. And if you treat them like a Toyota Camry, they will be destroyed. So it's the thought process of like, yeah, you're going to go 200 miles per hour around a racetrack. So yeah, you are going to need a little bit better fuel. You are going to need more, a little bit better maintenance, which is for us rest. Because the one thing we don't do well is rest. We're really good at not resting. And so that, and a similar example is, you can put, 6 quarts of oil inside of a Toyota engine, probably run it for 3 years without actually like burning the car up. Good luck doing that with a McLaren. Like it doesn't work that way. Like you need great fuel, great oil. Yeah. All of these things have to go right, and an incredible maintenance program to take care of that car so it can continue going around the track at 200. And so that was one of the biggest like unlocks for me of like, oh, like I'm treating my body like that Toyota or like Ford Taurus, when in reality I have a McLaren brain that is running full speed all the time. And if I don't leave and go disappear for 4 days or something, I will literally like burn the engine out. And that's what I think people need to like keep in mind is just you're driving a McLaren, like act like it.
Yeah. What is it that you're doing to do that? Right. Like what are your,
so I'm operating inside of a Sprint right now where I have a very clear endpoint of which I will shut down. So I'm operating, like I said, I've been riding, before we started this, I told you I've been riding for basically 5 days straight for my consulting offer that I'm going to be dropping here in September. And once September happens, I am going to take the first 4 days. It'll be Labor Day weekend or whatever. And then that following week, I'm leaving for about 5 days and I'll go off the grid for 2 or 3 days and probably just get in the Word, read, write, and just do nothing. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. In Colorado.
That's amazing.
So I have lots of questions to ask you also about Colorado. But
I love Colorado.
Yes, you do.
Before we close, can I say something real quick?
Yeah, good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just want to shout out to my team, Ira and Vic over in the Philippines, Andy here in Lincoln, Nebraska, Wes down in Texas. Like you guys, I absolutely love you. Thumos, Soter, Darkmatter wouldn't even be a thing without you guys. And so I wanted to make sure to take a second to shout out to you guys. Love you.
Awesome. Very cool.
And I love you.
Yes. Love you, bro. Well, guys, that is going to wrap it up for another episode of Spark to Fire. Thank you for listening. I'm sure this is a heavy taking note for everybody. And make sure you reach out to Eric if your business has any needs and related to, just building data feeds. You need to aggregate a bunch of information. And then I would recommend just reaching out to him on a personal level of just getting to know the dude, because my life got better from the day I met him. And that is a tangible difference because I literally got introduced to like 5 or 6 people that continue to change my life, even outside of Eric's. And I can still point to those people. I can still call those people today. So highly recommend just getting connected with this dude. And please leave a rating and a review on iTunes. If you guys want to see us continue getting great guests like Eric on the show, helps us go up in the algorithm and the rankings. And make sure you share this with one person that you think would enjoy it. That's also a good way that we grow. So thanks for listening and keep striking.